So, welcome in, everyone. We are so glad you could join us for this deep dive today.
Hmm.
What does it actually mean to, truly include someone in a classroom?
That is a big question, right? It's something we've been getting wrong for a long time.
Exactly. Because for decades, the model was basically just putting a desk in the back of a general education room for a student with a disability, and then just calling it inclusion,
Yeah, checking a box.
right? Checking a physical box. But that old model is completely dead.
Yeah.
Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating stack of recent research and policy documentation spanning from 2024 to 2026.
And this material is heavy, but it's incredible.
Oh, totally. The focus of these sources is all about innovative IEP inclusion strategies. And our mission for this deep dive is to really trace this radical shift. We are moving from that old baseline of physical inclusion to what experts are now calling a highly sophisticated neuroscience-informed paradigm of precision education.
Which is just a massive leap. And I think it's important to note whether you are an educator or maybe a parent navigating this stuff, or even a manager designing a corporate workspace, or maybe you're just, someone fascinated by human potential.
Right, it applies to everyone.
It really does. These strategies reveal some profound truths about how the human brain actually learns best. It's not just about schools anymore.
Okay, let's unpack this because before we can get into the really cool neuroscience and the agentic AI tools of 2026, we have to start with the legal catalyst.
You have to understand why this shift even happened in the first place.
Exactly. We don't get to the classroom of 2026 without a massive legal earthquake.
Yeah.
And that earthquake was the 2017 Supreme Court decision, Endrew F versus Douglas County School District.
Yeah, that case is the absolute engine for all the innovation we're going to talk about today.
So to set the stage, prior to this case, courts were operating under this really outdated framework from way back in 1982. It established what was known as the de minimis standard.
De minimis,
Yeah.
right, which is Latin for basically about minimal things.
Which is just, it's kind of wild to think about. It meant that school districts only had to provide a minimal educational benefit to satisfy the law for a student with an IEP.
A minimal benefit. Yeah, as long as a kid made some tiny, trivial amount of progress, the school was legally in the clear.
It's like a gym membership.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. It's like a gym saying they provided a health benefit just by letting you walk through the front door, even if you never actually lifted a weight or broke a sweat.
Yeah, you scanned your card, so we did our job.
Exactly. And can you imagine trying to learn in an environment where the legal baseline for your success is literally just minimal?
It's heartbreaking, really.
It is. And that's what happened with Endrew, the boy at the center of this case. He had autism, and his parents argued that his academic and functional progress had just completely stalled out.
Stalled for years. They were just copying and pasting his IEP goals from one year to the next.
Right. With zero real changes. And the crazy part is, the lower courts initially sided with the school district. They basically said, hey, he's making a tiny bit of progress, so that meets the de minimis standard.
Which just shows how broken the legal interpretation was.
But then it hits the Supreme Court. And Chief Justice John Roberts writes this unanimous decision that completely rejects the de minimis standard. Unanimous.
What's fascinating here is how that single ruling forced a profound psychological shift in the entire education system.
Tell me more about that, because the wording was very specific.
Very specific. The court ruled that an IEP must be reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances.
Appropriate in light of their circumstances.
Exactly. And the phrase that really became the new North Star was appropriately ambitious.
Appropriately ambitious. I love that.
It changes everything. It forced a massive transition from the old deficit-based planning, where you basically look at what a kid can't do.
Right, focusing on the broken parts.
Yeah, and it shifted to a strength-first approach. It completely changes the burden of proof for the modern general education teacher.
Because now you can't just say, well, we tried.
Exactly. Under the old standard, it was all about procedural compliance. Did we hold the meeting? Is the paperwork signed?
Did we check the boxes?
Right. Now, every single instructional choice must be defensible. It has to be linked to measurable growth. If a student stalls, the teacher needs hard proof of fidelity to the IEP.
So it puts a massive amount of accountability on the system, which is why, as a listener, you should care about this. Accountability standards transform institutions.
They completely rewrite the DNA of how a place operates.
Right. This wasn't just a win for one kid or one family. It fundamentally redefined human potential in the eyes of the state.
It basically mandated that every brain in that room deserves a high-level educational experience.
Which brings up a huge logistical problem, right?
Oh, absolutely. The reality of the classroom.
Yeah, because if the law says we must be appropriately ambitious for every single student, how do we actually do that when you have 30 entirely different brains sitting in a room?
Well, the sources from 2024 to 2026 make it clear. The very first step isn't just changing the lesson plan.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It's changing how we fundamentally view the architecture of the brain. We have to look at the July 2024 update to the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines.
UDL 3.0. This stuff is mind-blowing.
It really is. The core philosophy of UDL 3.0 is a hard shift from being educator-centered to being learner-centered.
And the most disruptive part of this, I think, is the complete death of the average.
Yes. The death of the average brain.
Right, because UDL 3.0 basically states that variability is the dominant feature of the human nervous system.
It's the rule, not the exception.
Exactly. So designing a lesson for the average student is literally a design flaw. It reminds me of those old military studies with fighter jet cockpits.
Oh, the pilot seat study? That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, for people who don't know, back in the day, the military tried to design cockpit dimensions based on the mathematical average of thousands of pilots.
They measured everyone and found the middle ground.
Right. But what they found was that out of thousands of pilots, literally zero fit the exact average profile.
Nobody is exactly average on every single metric.
Exactly. Some guys had longer arms, some had longer torsos. So by designing a seat for the average pilot, they had actually designed a seat that fit nobody.
Which led to terrible errors.
Fatal errors, right? And UDL 3.0 is applying that exact same statistical reality to how brains learn. If you teach to the average, you're teaching to nobody.
To fix that, UDL breaks the brain down into 3 strategic brain networks.
Let's walk through those, because this is the neuroscience of it all.
Sure. So the first one is the affective network. This is the why of learning.
The why.
Yeah. It's tied to the amygdala, the emotional center. It's all about engagement, motivation, and giving the student agency.
Because if a brain doesn't care about the information, it just blocks it out, right?
Basically, yeah. The amygdala acts like a bouncer. If it's not emotionally salient, it doesn't get into long-term memory.
So how do you engage that network?
By offering choices. Instead of a rigid assignment, you give them options on how to connect with the material.
Got it. Okay, what's the second network?
The second is the recognition network. This is the what of learning.
The what?
Right, how the brain gathers facts and categorizes sensory data. Traditional schools really messed this up by over-relying on just decoding printed text or listening to lectures.
Just reading and listening. Very limited.
Very. UDL 3.0 says we need visuals, models, and tactile supports, like using raised axes on a math graph so a kid can physically feel the data while seeing it.
Oh, that's brilliant. You're activating multiple pathways at once.
Exactly. And the third is the strategic network. This is the how of learning.
The how.
Yeah. It's the prefrontal cortex stuff, executive functioning, planning, expressing what you know.
So instead of making everyone write a 5-paragraph essay under a time limit, you give them multiple ways to show their work.
Right. Can they speak it? Can they draw a mind map? Can they use assistive tech?
Just let them show you they understand the concept.
Exactly. Don't grade them on their ability to hold a pencil if the goal is understanding history.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because you hear this and you might think, oh, that sounds like a lot of extra work just to accommodate a few kids with IEPs.
That is the most common misconception.
But the sources highlight this massive 2025 research study by Guo and Wang, and the results are staggering.
Oh, the 37.4% increase?
Yes. They found a 37.4% increase in academic achievement in classrooms that used high-fidelity UDL. And that wasn't just for the special education students.
Oh, that was the entire ecosystem.
The entire classroom. And the biggest gains were actually seen in neurotypical students who just had low baseline engagement.
Which proves the point. UDL is not just an accommodation for the margins. It is an optimizer for everybody.
When you design for the margins, the center thrives.
That is exactly right. If you build flexibility into the baseline, you catch the kids who were just bored or checked out under the old rigid system.
Okay, so we've mapped the brain networks. We have multiple means of representation. But there's a huge physical element here that we have to talk about.
The physical environment, yes.
Because according to the 2026 data, if a student's nervous system is totally overloaded by the physical room they're sitting in, all that UDL scaffolding just collapses.
It won't save you. You can have the best lesson plan in the world, but if the room is hostile to the brain, learning shuts down.
Which brings us to neuro-inclusive environmental engineering.
It's a fascinating shift because historically, accommodations were always about the lesson. Make the reading easier, give them extra time.
But neuro-inclusive design actually looks at the sensory properties of the room itself.
Exactly. For a lot of neurodivergent brains like ADHD or autism profiles, they don't have the same sensory filters that a neurotypical brain has.
Right. A neurotypical brain can just tune out the hum of a refrigerator or flickering light.
But an unfiltered brain is taking in every single piece of data at maximum volume.
It's like trying to solve algebra in the middle of a rock concert.
That is exactly what it feels like biologically. Your cognitive bandwidth is completely eaten up by just trying to survive the sensory input.
Leaving zero working memory for the actual math.
Zero, which is why we are seeing the end of uniform rows of desks. The new standard is sensory zoning.
Walk me through what a sensory zone classroom actually looks like.
Well, you divide the room into areas with different sensory intensities. So you have low stimulus zones,
What's in those?
soft lighting, acoustic dampening materials, maybe textured pillows or quiet tents. It's a place for a student to downregulate their nervous system.
And the key here is that they can use these zones without asking permission. Right?
Yes, that is crucial. It builds self-advocacy. They learn to monitor their own sensory load and step away before they have a meltdown.
That is so empowering. But then on the other side, you have active or collaborative zones.
Right, these are equipped with wobble cushions, standing desks, stability balls.
Now, wait, let me push back on this a little bit
Yeah.
because I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a traditional teacher.
Go for it.
If I've got half my class bouncing up and down on stability balls and the other half retreating into sensory tents whenever they want, doesn't that just create total chaos?
It sounds like it would, right?
Yeah, how does anyone focus in that environment?
Well, we have to redefine what focus actually looks like neurologically because bouncing on a wobble cushion isn't bad behavior or a distraction.
It's not.
No, the research calls it low-load fidgeting.
Low fidgeting.
For a brain with ADHD, stimulating the vestibular system through movement actually provides the baseline dopamine needed to activate the prefrontal cortex.
Oh, wow. So they literally need the movement to turn on the thinking part of their brain.
Exactly. If you force that kid to sit perfectly still in a hard plastic chair, they have to use all their brain power just to fight the urge to move.
Leaving nothing for the lesson.
Right. But if you let them bounce, the movement becomes subconscious. It regulates their attention.
That makes so much sense. It's like the environment stops fighting their biology.
Exactly. And the engineering goes way beyond furniture. Lighting is a huge issue.
Yeah, the sources talk a lot about the danger of traditional fluorescent lights.
They are awful for neurodivergent brains. They have this micro flicker and a low frequency hum.
Which can trigger migraines or even literal fight or flight responses.
So the 2025 and 2026 push is heavily mandating high frequency, flicker-free LEDs and just prioritizing natural daylight.
And there's also this concept of wayfinding, right?
Yes, wayfinding is about reducing the cognitive load of just navigating the room.
So using clear landmarks, color-coded signs, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Making the spatial layout predictable. The less energy you spend figuring out where things are, the more energy you have to learn.
Okay, so the room is optimized, the lights are great, the kids can move. But there is a huge logistical gap here.
What's that?
Even if the kid is perfectly regulated on their wobble cushion, they still have an IEP. They still legally require specialized instruction to close their specific learning gaps.
Right.
So how do they get that specialized instruction? Do they still leave the room?
Absolutely not. The 2025 and 2026 data shows a massive systemic demise of the pull-out model.
The pull-out model.
Yeah.
I remember this when I was in school in the 90s.
We all remember it.
The special ed teacher would literally walk into the room, tap a kid on the shoulder, and pull them out to a resource room.
It was incredibly stigmatizing.
The whole class knew exactly what was happening. It was basically branding them with a deficit label in front of all their friends.
And beyond the social trauma, it was just academically terrible.
Right, because imagine trying to learn a language, but every 20 minutes you get yanked out of a natural conversation to go do grammar worksheets in a closet.
You miss the context. You miss the general education instruction while you're gone.
So what replaced it?
The rise of embedded instruction, also known as embedded learning opportunities or ELOs.
ELOs. So the instruction happens inside the general ed classroom.
Yes. It weaves the IEP goals directly into the natural flow of the day, and there is a highly structured 4-step framework for this.
Okay, let's walk through the framework. Step 1.
Step 1 is identify the target goal. This is where the special educator and general educator sit down and align an IEP goal with the general curriculum.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay, let's imagine a kid named Leo. He has dyscalculia, so he struggles with math. His IEP goal is about mastering basic proportional reasoning.
Okay.
And his 8th grade science class is doing a chemistry lab on chemical reactions.
Got it.
So instead of pulling Leo out to do fraction flashcards, step 1 is targeting his proportional reasoning goal within the chemistry lab.
So making it relevant, what's step 2?
Step 2 is identify natural opportunities. They map out the day at a glance.
So finding the right moment in the lesson.
Exactly. For Leo, that moment is during the lab setup when everyone is measuring out milliliters of a solution.
Perfect. Step 3.
Step 3 is implement prompt hierarchy.
Prompt hierarchy. What does that mean in practice?
It means you don't just do the work for him, but you don't leave him drowning either. You scaffold.
Oh.
You might start with a visual cue. If he needs more help, a verbal cue, then explicit modeling. And you slowly fade those prompts as he gets it.
So you're systematically stepping back.
Right. And step 4 is collect data in the moment.
Because of that Endrew F ruling,
Right.
we have to prove progress.
Exactly. You have to document how Leo responded to the prompts right then and there.
Now, connecting these specific IEP goals to rigorous state standards seems really tough.
Oh.
But the sources highlight the Hawaii HCPS, the third model.
The Hawaii model is the gold standard for this.
Break that down for me.
Well, it starts with the belief that all students have to access the same high-level standards, no dumbing down the curriculum.
So how do they do that for a kid like Leo?
They identify access points, they write hyper-specific present level of performance statements, or PLEPs.
PLABs.
Yeah. And from those baselines, they generate SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
But the kicker is that these SMART goals are tied to general learner outcomes, or GLOs, right?
Exactly. GLOs are big life skills. Critical thinking, self-direction.
So if Leo connects this to the bigger picture, it proves that special education isn't a place you go to. It's a service you receive naturally among your peers.
Yes. You don't miss the core content.
But here's my concern. Tracking UDL variability, managing sensory zones, mapping prompt hierarchies, taking real-time data on 30 kids
It's a lot.
sounds impossible for one human being to do.
It is functionally impossible, which is exactly why the tech of 2025 and 2026 stepped in. We have to talk about agentic AI.
The agentic AI. Now, to be clear, we are not talking about simple generative AI from a few years ago.
No, not at all. Generative AI was just you typing a prompt and getting text back.
Right, agentic AI is autonomous.
Completely. It dynamically adapts in real time without a human having to press a button.
The sources call the core of this the learner profile engine.
Yes. The engine is constantly pulling in data on a student's performance, their IEP parameters, their preferences.
And it uses that for hyper-personalized learning, especially this feature called dynamic difficulty.
Dynamic difficulty is incredible.
Walk me through how it works. Like, say we have a high school history class reading a text about the Civil War.
Okay. In a normal class, you might have one kid reading at a 12th grade level, one at an 8th grade level, and one at a 4th grade level.
Right. And a teacher used to have to spend hours rewriting that article 3 different ways.
But with agentic AI, the system instantly levels the text for each individual kid the second they open it on their tablet.
Instantaneously.
Yes, it changes the vocabulary and sentence structure to match their exact reading level.
But it keeps the grade level historical concepts exactly the same.
Exactly. Everyone engages in the same high-level debate, regardless of their decoding skills.
That is just wild. And there's also 2047 support, like Dartmouth's Neurobot TA.
Right, which builds incredible trust. If a kid is doing homework at 9 p.m. and gets stuck, the Neurobot, which knows their IEP, jumps in and offers the exact right visual scaffold.
So they never hit that wall of total frustration.
Exactly.
But the AI goes beyond just academics. It's doing behavioral mission control.
Yes, platforms like School AI are doing some wild stuff with this.
They're detecting frustration language. How does that even work?
It analyzes keystrokes, how fast they're deleting things, response latency. It flags it before the kid even throws their pencil across the room.
And then it surfaces a social emotional learning prompt.
Right, an SEL prompt. It might pause the screen and say, hey, take a deep breath. Or would you like to message the teacher for a break?
Okay, I have to pause here because this sounds amazing. But are we outsourcing empathy to machines?
It's a huge question.
Right, because if a bot is managing a kid's emotional frustration. What happens to the teacher-student relationship?
It's a valid fear, but the reality is actually a brilliant paradox.
A paradox. How so?
Well, think about all the administrative stuff we just talked about. Leveling text, writing IEP goals, tracking data.
It's exhausting.
Right. In fact, 57% of special ed teachers use AI as a thought partner now. Tools like Magic School AI, Zoom AI Companion, Co-IEP prototypes.
They are drafting Pele AFP statements and SMART goals in seconds, saving teachers like 4+ hours a week.
Exactly. So by letting the AI handle that massive cognitive load and the real-time text leveling, the teacher is freed up.
Oh, I see.
They are freed up to focus purely on human connection. The AI flags the frustration, but the teacher is the one who walks over with the energy and the empathy to actually connect.
It doesn't replace the teacher. It gives them back their humanity.
Exactly. They aren't burned out from paperwork, so they can actually be present.
Which brings us to the next point.
Yeah.
Because speaking of humanity and emotional regulation, the AI might catch frustration from a math problem.
Right.
But what happens when a student is fundamentally dysregulated because of trauma and AI can't fix that?
No, it absolutely cannot. And this is a huge focus in the 2025 research.
The concept of behavioral challenges are often just trauma or dysregulation, not intentional noncompliance.
Yes. For a long time, we viewed a kid acting out as just them being stubborn or bad.
Right. They are choosing to break the rules.
But neuroscience tells us their nervous system is actually in a state of fight or flight. They literally don't feel safe.
So the research proposes this rhythm body mind architecture.
Right. It's a trauma-informed relational architecture.
Let's break that down. First pillar. Start with rhythm, not rules.
Yes. Because a traumatized brain is constantly scanning for threats. Unpredictability is terrifying to them.
So you establish a rhythm.
Right. 5-minute opening rituals. Maybe it's a student-led affirmation or an emoji check-in on the board.
It regulates the nervous system because it's predictable.
Exactly. It tells the brain, you are safe here. We do the same thing every day.
The second pillar is give bodies agency.
Which connects back to the wobble cushions, but it's deeper.
Yeah, the research talks about allowing body breaks, using rockers, or literally letting a kid lie flat on the floor.
Right. Because trauma often strips away physical autonomy. If you force a traumatized kid to sit perfectly still, rigid, hands folded.
It can trigger them.
Exactly. But if you give them agency over their physical posture, it lowers their defensive walls. Their capacity to focus increases.
The third pillar really fascinated me. Mindful listening.
Oh, this is a game changer for de-escalation.
The strategy is basically reflecting a student's words back to them without interpretation, right?
Yes. When a kid blows up, our instinct is to assert control. We say, calm down, stop yelling.
But that just makes it worse.
Exactly. It escalates the power struggle. Mindful listening shifts it from control to mutual presence.
So if a kid yells, "This is stupid, I hate this,"
You literally just reflect it calmly. You are feeling like this is stupid and you hate it.
it validates them without judging. It's amazing how fast children read adult regulation.
Faster than any lesson plan.
It's like emotional wifey. If the teacher is calm, the kid's nervous system hooks into that calm network.
Yes. This raises such an important question, though. How much of what we call misbehavior is just a nervous system screaming for safety?
It really makes you rethink discipline entirely.
If a student is fighting their own body just to comply with rigid rules, they have zero cognitive energy left for complex thinking.
None. Okay, so we've covered the legal mandate, the physical space, AI instruction, and trauma architectures.
It is a lot of moving parts.
It is. But circling all the way back to our first point about the Endrew F case,
The need for proof.
right? How do we actually prove to the courts and the parents that all this stuff is working?
You need a beta loop and a collaborative ecosystem.
And we are finally seeing the end of the lost sticky notes.
Thank goodness, yes. The old way of taking data was a mess, a teacher scribbling on a Post-it and losing it in a drawer.
Now it's a total digitization of the workflow.
Right. Tools like AbleSpace and Kit for Teams,
It's one-click logging right on their phones during the instruction.
over 10 types of data collection, and it graphs it automatically.
Automated graphing, that is huge. It reminds me of modern sports analytics.
Oh, how so?
Like, you don't wait until the end of the season to see if a player's swing is broken, right? You use an iPad on the sidelines to adjust their mechanics in the second quarter.
That is a perfect analogy for database individualization, or DBI.
DBI, so they adjust instruction immediately.
Right. If a strategy isn't working, the graph shows a flat line. The teacher pivots on day 3, rather than waiting for a 9-week grading period to find out the kid failed.
And the collaboration part of this is the monthly data dialogue.
Yes. General ed and special ed teachers actually meet to review these automated graphs together.
Democratizing insight.
Exactly. If the science teacher figures out a strategy that works wonders for Leo, the math teacher sees that data log by lunchtime and uses it too.
The responsibility for success is distributed across the whole team.
It's a true ecosystem.
This has been such an epic journey today. Let's just synthesize these key takeaways.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did.
Yeah.
We went from the Endrew F ruling, setting the legally ambitious standard, all the way to agentic AI and trauma-informed spaces.
And the overarching theme here is clear. Precision education is completely replacing the one-size-fits-all model.
It's all about modifying the environment, leveraging this incredible tech, embedding the goals naturally, and democratizing the data.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
And, whether you are managing a team at work or raising a child at home, these principles, designing for variability, giving people agency, tracking real-time data, they are universally applicable.
They absolutely are. And honestly, it leaves me with one final kind of provocative thought about all this.
Oh, what's that?
Well, think about it. If universal design for learning proves that there is literally no average brain,
Right.
and if these innovative, highly individualized strategies are increasing achievement for everyone, neurotypical and neurodivergent alike,
Yeah.
then maybe we are approaching a day where the label special education becomes completely obsolete.
Wow. Wait, really?
Yeah. What if in the near future, this highly neuro-inclusive AI-supported framework simply becomes the standard blueprint for how every single human being goes to school?
Special education just becomes education because it's perfectly tailored to everyone from the start.
Exactly. The label just disappears.
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you got as much out of it as we did, and we'll catch you next time.
Edu resonance talk.